preparation for the upcoming submission into government. This year, of course, it's meeting by Hollywood Square. So, it's not perfect, but certainly it's better than, the options that would have been available to us many years ago. So again, thank you so much. So thought I'd just maybe spend a quick little bit of time doing an overview and then open it up for questions and comments. Like Council, Parliament has managed to do adaptation. Of course, it's a bit more of a challenge with 338 people and the need for interpretation. Actually, often people don't think about, the need for interpretation, but there are challenges. January, of course, last year, we were looking at what was happening in Wuhan and thought it was low risk. And my biggest concern was, a $27 billion deficit. And as you might recall, there was considerable upheaval in terms of, the protests that were happening across the country. And of course, what a difference a year does make. We spent the spring mostly doing emergency legislation, so we would just be called in for emergency legislation. Following the prorogation, we returned to a pretty reasonably functioning parliament where legislation is getting introduced, bills are being moved into committee, and things are, as I say, not perfect, but certainly a functioning parliament. Ottawa is actually shut down, and so parliament returns next week. And they are further modifying the number of people that they're going to allow to be in person. It was about, 60 plus, and I believe that they're going to diminish that even further, but the rest of us will be virtual. As you're aware, the COVID support measures had to be moved out rapidly. There was a number of gaps in terms of some of the programs, especially as they related to small business. I would say that, we worked together reasonably well in of moving the measures out quickly, supporting the government, and making changes as they needed. Certainly I heard from business owners in Clearwater in terms of some of the challenges that they were facing and some of the problems with the original measures. And so we were able to get a number of adaptations, changes. Not perfect still. I mean, one of the biggest concerns I'm hearing still is from new business owners. And, certainly if someone bought a business in January and can't show their revenue reduction, they are very, very challenged right now. So some of those stories, of course, are very heartbreaking. Our biggest job the government has ahead of itself is the vaccine procurement. And certainly there was very concerning news today from Pfizer, whereby there will be no shipments next week. And that's going to create a number of challenges. As you recall, different provinces, some chose to hold their second dose in reserve, others chose to appropriately. And of course, there's, certainly not any the data that shows efficiency of the vaccines is at the 21-28 day distribution second dose level. There's no data that shows how effective or how much the effectiveness is diminished by withholding. So a big concern that I think everyone is trying to grapple with right now. The budget will be as anticipated in the spring. We actually haven't had a budget in this parliament, which is unprecedented, but we do anticipate a budget that will be tabled in the spring. The current deficit for the fiscal year is going to be in the $400 billion range, and the debt of the nation or the federal government is going to be over $1 trillion. The government in an economic update indicated that they were going to be spending about $100 billion in economic recovery, but quite frankly, we don't know how they're going to spend that money, and certainly anticipate the budget like I'm sure everyone is. Someone said that probably the best economic stimulus that anyone could do is to get the vaccines out and get life somewhat returned to normal. There is a minority government, as we're all aware. Certainly from my perspective, it would be great to have everyone vaccinated before there was any sort of talk of an election. having a government go into caretaker mode, and I guess Peter can speak to that, in the middle of a crisis is probably not the most ideal, especially, as I say, when we're trying to get a vaccination rollout. To have caretaker mode isn't great. And constituency, our office has been, Service Canada closed down, so there was a lot of people that were being very challenged in terms of what was happening in their lives. So certainly extraordinarily busy. I never knew we had people in so many locations across the country or across the world, as they were trying desperately to scramble home. And I think Foreign Affairs did a pretty admirable job of that. But of course, the biggest issue for us right now is, let's get this vaccination, let's move back into sort of a post-pandemic, and then really, what is the economic plan going to be? So, I know that we sort of all welcome, infrastructure funding and different federal government dollars being spent, but certainly making sure that they are going to be the most effective in terms of helping us turn around. And I guess to, certainly locally, to some extent, the Trans Mountain Pipeline has been a bit of a local economic stimulus, although from some of your business owners, I hear they had hoped for more opportunities than they got. So hopefully that has turned around a bit. And I continue in my role as Shadow Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations. And interestingly, Peter has the same role. And so certainly for BC, we'll be able to collaborate on a number of issues there. So with that, I guess any questions, comments, things you'd like me to take back? The lack of internet is going to be my absolute priority for one of my budget comments. You look at Cannon Lake right now, who is in shutdown, and of course their kids are at home, and there's no internet for them to do their schooling. And of course, we've talked about internet for years, but I mean, it's just become so clear that we have to have adequate, appropriate internet and cellular service across this country. And of course, this pandemic has shown it more than anything. And I know certainly in your area, there remains challenges. So with that, I'll, as I say, just open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you. Is there any questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Sim.
Cathy, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can. First of all, Happy New Year to you. Thank you very much for all of your information. I just wondered if you were hearing any rumblings or anything about when the federal government might be making some announcements in regards to the travel industry. It's good that they've sort of done their incremental thing, but obviously, BC is fairly dependent on it, trying to make decisions and not getting any word on anything. So I wondered if you had any shadows of whispers during the thing.
So I think they are in current negotiations in terms of aviation. So that is something that is ongoing. We do know that, of course, people don't just rely on it to go to the sunny south. Getting to a medical appointment is an issue. They have committed, and they were in the process of developing and have the sort of dollars allocated in terms of the highly affected sectors, which include tourism. What I would look for, and the government had always promised that, when Greyhound shut down, they were going to give it some time to see how it sort of worked out in the wash in terms of where the private sector picked up and where the private sector didn't pick up. And, clearly that has not been reassessed at all. And we do know that there are gaps in terms of what has been picked up in terms of routes. So I think it's time for them to sort of follow through. We do have a new transport minister, and so it'll take them a little bit of time to get up to snuff on their file. But, that was something at the time. Greyhound, the minister at the time said, let's see how it flows, and then we can make some decisions. And as I say, it's been enough time for sure.
Thanks for that. I don't know if I missed your first part, but I was really more looking at, border restrictions, airlines, any bailouts for Air Canada. Obviously, you're dealing with the closure of the Air Canada route there. But anything Clearwater in previous summers, we see well over 200, 300,000 international visitors and 4,700 domestic visitors. So, you know, there's been no signs. There's a lot of operators in this area. What's the rollout for that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Sorry, I missed your thinking on that question. I would suspect that they are going to be looking at on both sides of the border some reasonable levels of infection, having a COVID rate that is fairly low and relatively even. And certainly, you know, I think the vaccination program is really going to matter, which goes back to, you know, the most important economic stimulus the government can do is get this vaccination program out. So they are going month by month in terms of the decision making. They haven't said, okay, when, you know, the infection rate is down to X, we will reopen. The discussions are going month to month. And of course, it's bilateral discussions, and we have a new American administration. So of course, that's also going to make a difference.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Cathy. That was very informative. It was really good to hear what you had to say.
Great. So thank you. And if, again, if you have any thoughts for budget submissions, please send them my way. I will be sending it within the next week to the finance minister.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, we're going to be hearing from our MLA, Peter Milobar. Go ahead, Peter.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks everyone for having me on the agenda today. And Cathy and I seem to be doing a pretty similar tour for the first month here of the year, and that's pretty common. But yeah, it's great to be back. And obviously, we had the election in the fall, and as Cathy said, it did result in a bit of slowdown for government, and we're still seeing that impact right now in terms of the provincial program around business grants, small and medium-sized business grants. The retooling of that to try to get businesses. So any of your local businesses, I would encourage them, if they haven't looked at it recently, there was changes made, things like having to have been in business for 3 years. Now it's having to have been in business for 18 months. A few other things that were qualifiers that were very daunting for a lot of businesses that have been relaxed a little bit. And I say a little bit because the uptake has still been very small on that provincial business grant program. But coming out of the election, heading in, I was a labor critic for a week. I had previously been our environment and climate change critic. We switched up critic roles, and then the election got called. Coming out of the election, though, I am now our Indigenous, as Cathy said, our Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation critic. And so both Cathy and I, with that federal provincial eye on the same file, hopefully brings a bit of stability and strength of answer, especially to our local Indigenous leadership, as well as all of you on councils that work so closely with those local Indigenous leadership groups. I was also made our House leader, which is much more of an internal caucus type position, but it's essentially kind of a number 2 on the pecking order, I guess, below the House leader or the leader as the House leader, and you are in charge of doing things like our strategy when we're back in the legislature, question period strategy, who will be up in question period, how long we'll debate certain bills, and how we will be voting. That all kind of falls under that role. So a significant amount of extra work, but I'm looking forward to the challenge it brings, and still trying to overlay, obviously, the responsibilities and the critical needs of the riding. So I have been in contact recently with both Hans and Doug around the road, and the mayor's been emailing as well, and we've been emailing back and forth a bit on that. Hopefully, we will see some movement on the permits in time for that mid-March window that the work needs to get done on the Clearwater River Road, or we'll be in a whole new conversation yet again around what will happen on the rafting side of the equation for Clearwater and the surrounding areas. So really, you know, our focus moving forward will be the budget as well. Provincially, when we were back in the legislature in December for 2 weeks after the election, that was to pass one piece of legislation. It was not to pass the legislation around the $500 or $1,000 COVID relief benefit. The legislation that was actually put in front of us was for extending the ability for the government, instead of introducing the provincial budget in mid-February, which is when municipalities, school districts, everyone would expect to see what's in the budget for the coming year for them, so they can do last minute changes before their fiscal year starts in April. The bill was actually to move the introduction of the budget until the end of April. April 30th was the last legal date for the government to introduce the new budget. It sounds like it'll be actually introduced on April 20th, but it's still almost 2 months behind schedule of where it would normally be. So we are keeping an eye out for what impacts that may have, as I say, on those organizations like a municipality, like nonprofits, like school districts, because obviously not knowing 100% what the funding sources are going to be, funding commitment levels from the government, it makes it very tough. It also means that there will be no new programs, no new infrastructure programs, anything of that nature between now and mid to end of April at the earliest, because the spending they have is locked in, and there won't be the ability for the next few months to add anything there. So any outstanding infrastructure grants that you may have as a community will still be working within those envelopes, but there'll be nothing new coming forward until the end of April. And that is a bit of a concern in the parts of the world that we live in, and then even further north, because obviously construction windows get tighter, and there's that real risk of, even though it's only a couple of months, of the potential of losing a whole construction year by the time things work through for approval. So hopefully things can be expedited. So those are the types of issues we'll still be looking for and moving forward on. And as always, I look forward to hearing from any of you, and any questions, concerns, or follow-up items. I got a list from Sun Peaks. I've had a list from Barrier, and the regional district offered a few bits of advice as well. So certainly anything that comes up over time or that you have on the top of your mind today, I'm willing to hear about and continue to try to press forward as best as we can.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any questions from council? Go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Peter. And again, and Happy New Year to you and to your family. Sounds like great things are moving ahead for you on a personal front with your family and all sorts of great things. I guess what I'm wondering is that with some of the government grants that have been extended by the provincial government to communities in terms of revenue depletion, so it's called the COVID restart. The COVID restart. It seems quite vague, and I think that we've got some concerns that it's so vague that there may be some clawbacks on that. And looking, for some clarity. And one of the discussions that we've had around this table is certainly around community well-being. The news that keeps coming out, it's not, although we've got news of a vaccine, it's not going to be solved in the next little while. Sort of no stretching point on that issue of well-being under that fund. Do you know anything more about it, like implementing some programs? I look at our kids. There's some real suffering there. We're all very much aware of our opioid crisis. And although we get a lot of numbers out of our larger city centers, there's certainly rumblings even in smaller communities about, things that are clenching people's lives. So any understanding about how those funds could be used and the flexibility on it, or the fact that, will they claw back, or will they be more gracious with it? Anything you know?
Yeah, thanks. And that's come up at a couple of the other councils as well. So there's definitely that underlying concern. Our understanding is that there's a large flexibility to what those are allowed to be used for. The calculation, there was never a really clear understanding of how they calculated. I know the mayor of Vancouver was obviously very vocal and upset that they did not seem to get the lion's share of funding for once, which probably set off a cheer around the province of smaller municipalities, let's be honest. But it seemed to be a bit more of a calculation of who was being impacted for information around impacts of COVID costs and lost revenues due to COVID and things of that nature. And I think that's why the per capita plus the difference of COVID, you saw that what was seen to be a different calculation than in the past. All that said, I would still say as I said to the other councils, work closely with your your staff in terms of what may or may not be clawed back. Let us know if you are hearing of clawbacks or if they're rumbling at all, because that was not our understanding that would happen, that you would have time. I know in the city council's case, they only use some of the money in the year one, with the plan on banking to use some of the money in subsequent years. And so, you know, that would be the expectation moving forward, I think. The concern I have is that's starting to build is not only the potential for clawback, but also the potential, as we're seeing right now with community gaming funds. There was an article out again today. There is no capital going out. We've been trying to track over the last year. You know, the operating type grants seem to be about the same as always in our region, but capital, I don't think we've seen capital dollars out of that fund in this in the interior for almost 2-3 years now. And so there seems to be a real inequity starting to happen within those gaming funds. And those funds are starting to, sounds like, be repurposed for COVID issues as well. And so I think we all agree there's obviously big COVID issues within communities, but at a time when nonprofits who rely heavily on those gaming funds in all our communities are starting to feel the pressure from lack of people being able to donate and support those groups as they normally might, the gaming fund slowdown could be a big hit to them as well. So I would encourage people in your community, again, to reach out to me if they're hearing issues with their nonprofits that they work with around gaming funds. That's the only way we'll be able to shine a light on this. And in terms of the COVID response, Cathy touched on it. Obviously, federal is in charge of getting the vaccine to BC. BC is in charge of getting it into your arm. There's growing concerns. There was concerns right from the get-go that the manufacturer was a 21-day for second dose. BC adopted a 35-day. That's being stretched out. The big problem, and I still haven't heard an answer to this, is how moving forward, even if they get their first 500,000 shots into people's arms by the end of March, from that point forward, you need about 3.5 million more people to have their dose by the end of September. If you do the quick math on that, around 180 days, that works out to about 40,000 needles a day that need to be done. And right now we're at a pace of a few thousand, a couple thousand, 3,000-4,000 needles a day. So we're not sure where the ramp up will be. And the reason it goes up to 40,000 a day is you have to remember everyone needs that second shot. So it's not 3.5 million. 3.5 million people need the shot, but it's 7 million doses need to be administered. And so when you do that math, that's where you suddenly get up into that 40,000-50,000 people a day that need to have their arm poked. And so it's going to be something that's a challenge. I do think everyone is putting their best effort forward, but there are certainly a lot of unanswered questions in terms of how this is going to roll out on any large scale, and what does that mean for communities like a Clearwater in terms of timing for when that dose may come. So, you know, I had a call with IHA last week, and they had indicated that for smaller communities, but they then put an asterisk saying Clearwater, they don't consider rural or remote. I shouldn't say rural, but remote enough because you are close enough to Kamloops. But I questioned whether they were going to be rolling out to remote communities on the 5-year increments, because that doesn't make a lot of sense with the population base. You would tie up that much travel time and resources to send out a community nurse or somebody to stick the arm of 5 people in one age demographic and come back a week later when the next age demographic opens. So I think there's going to be a lot of messiness when we get to the bigger rollout within rural areas. And we'll have to keep an eye on that, and definitely, again, keep me posted if you're hearing things on your end.
Thanks very much for that, Peter. We're just dialing back in, so we've got another small technical. You raise a really good point about rolling it out to the rural communities, and especially how are they expecting people to get into the larger city centers?
Yeah, to be clear, they weren't talking. So my question was in the context of remote communities, especially in northern health areas where you have Indigenous communities where First Nations Health is going to administer, and you have Interior Health or Northern Health needing to administer the broader community. And is there going to be overlap where you just go in and do one community whole versus one subset versus the other? because of travel times, travel distances. And so that's when they, in passing, had mentioned how, the North Thompson Valley, because it's close enough, wouldn't be considered that remote. It's obviously rural, but it's not considered remote. And so, they weren't, I want to be clear, they weren't saying you're not going to receive the vaccine or that you'd have to come to Kamloops for the vaccine. I was just trying to make sure that they're maximizing people's use. It serves no purpose. Let's use Blue River as an example, to send a car with a nurse to Blue River to vaccinate an age group from 80 to 75 and then be done for the day, instead of just vaccinating as many people as you could do in that day, regardless of age at a certain point, or you're sending that car all the way back a full day to go to Blue River and back again to then do from 75 to 70, and then the next week from 65 to 60 type thing, right? Whereas in Kamloops, they will in all likelihood do those 5-year increments because of the size of population in each of those age demographics. So that was something that I was just saying we all need to keep an eye out to make sure that they're maximizing the efficiency of doses going out into the smaller community areas.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, both you, Peter, and you, Cathy, and thank you for your patience for our technical issues. And we'll move on with the meeting. Council report. Councillor Banford.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Frizzle. Yep, been keeping up on reading and the email notes that are coming up and some of the attachments that our staff have sent out. Attended a financial workshop on the 12th and had a forestry working group meeting this morning that I'll report on later. And that pretty much takes it for council this last 2 weeks.
All right, my report, I attended the budget workshop with the rest of council on January 12th. Councillor Haring.
Yeah, the budget workshop as well, but aside from that, not much activity.
Okay, Councillor Mackenzie.
Budget workshop, and I don't know if Councillor Sim has heard anything about this, but talking to a lot of parents and concern with now that COVID is in the school system, barrier-wise, lots of parents that I've been talking to in my circle and out of the circle talking about getting ready to withdraw kids once it gets up here, and that's concerning. But I mean, we've been lucky for 13 months, and the fact of the matter is it's finally a year now. Get adjusted. I just was curious if anyone else had heard anything about that.
Go ahead, Councillor Sim.
Yeah, that's a big one, huh? Because for almost 10 months, it has been something that we've really worked with, and yet our schools have not been impacted, and I would attribute it to the rigors of parents, of students, of staff, of all of it. Like in the North Thompson here, it's been really good. We've been watching really closely, and you're right, there are the numbers that are increasing. What's interesting when you dive into the data is that it's the transmissions are not happening within the schools, it's just the cases are. So you're not seeing whole classes that are having to be because there's been a transmission. So what's going on outside of the school is brought inside. So the North Thompson, because of their rigors, our numbers haven't reflected any cases. And I think that that's really positive. So if I could suggest that the message being brought back to parents is that if you look at the data, the rigors that are in place are working, schools are safe, as long as our community continues to follow what the health authority is asking. And I think that that's the best case. I think that the mayor said it well. He said we all have to behave as though it's within our community. And it's just, watching our gatherings, and it's, watching how we, the hand washing and all of that. And we see it. We see the slippage. We see it outside. We see, birthday parties that are being taken, outside and in backyards. Take a real lens. Is that the behavior that we're being asked to follow at this point in time? And we need to do it for the protection of our students and for keeping our kids in school. Especially in the rural areas, that internet internet component of going online again, it was not a good option. So I would say that it is beholden to all of us to keep up the gold standard of what we can do, and to certainly, you know, touch base. But the withdraw is not the answer. It is schools are safe, and if you look at any time there is an incident, that school, very similar to what the Sportsplex has introduced, has got that top-notch cleaning stuff that can completely eradicate. So I think that those are good things. Like, there are protocols in place. The danger is what's happening outside. I can't stress that enough. So, but I thank you for sharing that and, you know, bringing that forward, because, you know, we are seeing those incremental. The superintendent is doing a great job. I'm almost wondering if the superintendent should maybe put districts on their email list for what's going on. I don't know if that would be helpful. Just to ask, because it's a community issue. It's absolutely a community issue. And I think even our seniors would appreciate it. So the more that we continue to share it out, there's great confidence. And I've told you that I sit on the youth committee for the school. It's amazing. Like, the kids, they get the news, okay, yep, there's something there. They're still going to class because they're still following the rules. They're still, you know, following it. So, yeah, it's what we do outside.
Thank you. The report?
I was able to attend the Church on Wells Gray, which I can report on a bit later, the same budget meetings and that, and just really the time with the school board is really a full-time job.
Okay, moving on to committees of the whole, oh, me. No, it's you.
Just you.
Sorry. Sorry, I missed you. Councillor Taylor.
That's okay. So, budget meeting January 12th, we also had Travel Task Force meeting on January 12th, where we were doing more grant writing, so it's becoming a skill I'm developing. And I mean, the other news, you know, most people probably know I have internet again, and so I signed up for the Starlink beta test. It's phenomenal. It's life-changing. It's expensive. Like, it's not. It was an easy decision for me because my job, like, financially, you know, I'm covered. And it was a trade-off of paying rent for an office versus having slightly more expensive internet. But it is going to be a barrier for some people. In, you know, getting set up is $800 of someone's money, and it's $129 a month. It's unlimited. It's better than what people rurally have today. Like, the people who can't connect up to cable options, this is better and financially comparable. But it's that value equity is, I think, still going to be something that we need to figure out. Like, you know, are the subsidy plans that we can, you know, how can people who, you know, don't necessarily have financial means kind of for that more expensive version of internet, but they live rurally, like, how can we balance that pricing equity between whatever, like $50 per max on a month versus $120 or whatever it is. Not 50, okay.
I'm so glad you bring that up. Do you have anything else to support? Because I do actually have a broader question, because I think it's really important. One is actually not at, you know, the $129 for unlimited, still pretty great value. And if you look at the comparative of your downloads and your upload speeds, you are now the new gold standard. Like, you know, for everybody who had high speed, you're on the Autobahn. So they get you on all of it. So the unlimited and the quickness, I think you're getting good delivery. What I am curious about is why Starlink is not eligible for any of the federal granting programs. So they can't tie into that. And I don't know if it's because they want to create those infrastructure type connections, but I don't know how they were ever going to be able to get up to the Upper Clearwater or, you know, to your part of the woods. So to me, is there an advocacy or is there a rationale, or do you know anything more about why can't people tie in and get those subsidies?
Yeah, that's why I raised it. Like,
yeah,
you know,
thank you.
Subsidies or grant programs, or, you know, what can we do to, or what can governments do, not necessarily the local government, but, you know, provincial government do to kind of help people or help companies provide a more valuable or higher value to be a bug service, I guess. Because for a lot of rural people, this will be their only option. It's not, so yes, it might be faster and yes, it's unlimited, but there isn't a limited, slower version that they can buy, right? So it's $120 or nothing. So we still kind of, there's still that gap. If you live rurally, you don't have any of the other options, and if you can't afford that one option, then you're back to having no option.
Well, that's why I raised about the connectivity, about, how we can tie into some of these federal and the provincial granting, and we heard both our representatives speak about it. I want to, first of all, I think we need to come to council for it, but, ExploreNet was originally, fostered by government money, right? So it was a real kicker when they sold the shop, because that was on taxpayers, and that's when they implemented the overages. As soon as it went to private enterprise, that's when, things became unreasonable for rural people. So I don't know if it's worth writing a letter. I don't know if it's worth doing a bit more, maybe forwarding it to the Community Economic Development Task Force to ask their input. Ms. Grill, I know that's out of line, but any thoughts or?
I don't understand why they wouldn't allow Sterling, so we have to figure that out.
And I don't know if it's been a trials, but when I went into that, and that's why I was hoping Councillor Taylor, I don't know if you found anything, but it is about the $800 startup, which is the grand scheme, far more economical than creating the entire line. So trying to figure out, is there an access point or something like that? And because it's trials, will it? So I just wonder if there's a way that we kind of keep it, or perhaps, kick it over to our MLA and our MP and ask them to, keep that.
I always raise it, but.
I know, I was watching you to see.
But it's something that's pretty new, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So maybe that's why it's not, it needs to be pushed out there, this needs to be put to both governments.
Yeah, it's still a pilot phase.
Yeah,
It's
so
something, but.
they need to be considering that.
We don't have, they both said goodbye to us, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
Maybe it is, Ms. Grew, if you're able to touch base with me.
I also didn't mind sending an email. Yes, that was the council.
Sure, you could do that as counselor, and I can also do it through, my desk, to get, because I can also staff it in the government, not, only the MLA.
Maybe I can.
Yeah, but to really be, technically, it's government to government, politician to politician, staff to staff, so if you want to send something to them, that'd be great. Please see the rest of council and myself, and then I can do the same thing. Okay.
And depending on it, then I think it does need a letter of council and certainly a corridor approach.
Yeah.
And it could be because I don't know how many local governments or how many governments were actually involved in this decision. And maybe they're tweaking it, so just hoping.
And I know that when they first got the licenses in Canada, I think it was a First Nations community that got, like, the whole community became serviced by Starlink. Like, they did a big push and, distributed dish. Like, how was that funded? Like, is there some kind of community program that can be funded provincially, or something that, through grants that could subsidize the initial upfront costs to get people with no other options connected? Not people that have 10 options already, but, the people who really have no
All of it, up in Clearwater or out your way.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was a very long.
No, that's great. That's important. Yeah.
Candle Creek,
Yeah.
right?
There's lots of areas.
Raft River.
Well, the other side of the highway.
Yeah.
Right.
Could ExploreNet be classified as an invasive species? Tie in those two things?
We'd have to get funding for both.
Okay, moving on to Committee of the Whole reports. The next economic development meeting is February 16th. Infrastructure, Councillor Sim. Parks and Recreation, Councillor Mackenzie.
Next meeting, April 6th.
Finance and Audit, Councillor Taylor.
So we had a meeting earlier today, the next one, I have it right here, is on February 2nd. We'll be back to finance again. And also, we'll be having a, public consultation, the week of February 10th. So everyone can keep an eye out for that. More to come.
Thank you. Standing committee reports, Joint Services Advisory Committee, Councillor Haring.
Next meeting is March 8th.
Okay, Trail Task Force Committee, Councillor Taylor.
So our next meeting is February 9th. I do have 3 recommendations from the Trail Task Force. So one is, yes, another grant application. So the recommendation is that the Trail Task Force Committee recommends to Council and the District apply for the BC Active Transportation Grant for the construction of the trail from Park Drive connecting to Strawberry Stack through Park Drive Park, and that the trail is constructed as Type 4 trail standard on a volunteer basis. So this will basically be switchbacking down the hill from Park Drive down to the flat.
Yeah, for your agenda.
Yeah, sorry, it is on the agenda.
Page 22. Thank you.
So I guess I'll make that recommendation. Any questions?
I'll second the recommendation.
Discussion? So the volunteer part concerns me because it seems to be, it's a steep grade. So it seems like it's gonna need a lot of work. Is there any other money in that grant or anything? Because it is a really important trail. Like, it's a great option. And I don't know what the parameters of the volunteer, but it seems like it has to be really dug out. Like, it reminds me of the Bella Coola Hill.
Yeah.
So the grant funding would cover like geotechnical and that stuff. I haven't seen a grant application yet. Our chair is the one who's been corresponding back and forth with our transportation, with the BC, our transportation staff.
Does this not require a machine though, like to dig out?
Yeah, there'll be some of that, but not, you won't be able to have a heavy duty going down the hill. It'll be mostly like what we did on the Park Road Trail. It'll be hand a Type 4 is only about that way, and it's a trail. It's just making the trails that are already there, proper trail, taking into consideration water bars and things like that. Is there a volunteer team already? Well, there's got a trails committee feel. They can do it. Correct?
Go to see.
Mr. Banford, one, Mr. Lindenberg, Kevin McLeod, Derek Coates, Steve Cooperman,
Okay.
Mr. Bruce, Steve Taylor.
We'll help you. We'll come. And this is in addition to the one that we've already got for a trail that's coming down the hospital hill, right?
Yeah, this is actually just to connect, Strawberry Flat.
Yeah.
So the high school students a bit safer than what they do, and then community members. And you'll notice the red, one comes out of district property closer to Trucks Road, and the blue is a cross one that comes out of Florida Village at the bottom of Keystone. So it will connect to the one that we're applying for the other one.
No, that's great. Thank you for the opportunity for discussion.
Okay, so any further questions? All right, all those in favor? Carried.
So my next recommendation, that the Trails Task Force forward a recommendation to Council for the amendment of the District of Clearwater's Trail Master Plan. Sorry, I just realized the recommendation is that Council amend, yeah, not that we put a forward recommendation, Council amend the District of Clearwater's Trail Master Plan to include Appendix D, the cycling plan, and to remove the reference to the trail segment 4A along the North-Thompson River on the council land. So the intent of the cycling plan is very much to, when it comes to kind of grants, having a clear cycle plan in the Trails Master Plan, kind of helps kind of put forward opposition in applying for grants, and then the removal of segment 4A along the river is very much just not seeing that as a trail that we will be actively developing or maintaining, because of the liability there.
As always, the work that that committee does is outstanding. I am wondering, and I'll refer to you, Ms. Brew, is if there would be room or appetite to have somebody or even yourself speak to the Community Economic Development Task Force, because all that work is linking the communities together. And there's discussion, and certainly we all had the opportunity to read in the report, there's a desire for that branding. And I mean, you know, immediately, oh my God, can you just not imagine the strawberry festival that occurs and you celebrate on the bike paths, and seeing those two groups work together and being, you know, harmonious in their efforts. I don't know if you think that there's value to that, but there's a linkage project that's already taking place that has an economic impact. Yes. It's fantastic.
Okay, is that what you're moving that?
Yes, I'll make that recommendation.
Okay, is there a second for that? Any more further questions? All those in favor? Carried. Any non-council here?
No, sorry. This was really easy. The minutes of the Child Task Force Committee held November 10th, 2020, being received. We'll make that.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, junior council, we have been in discussion, and we've got some shy council issues, so we're going to have to work a little bit on them. So hopefully I'll have a better report next meeting. Forestry Working Group, Councillor Banford.
Thank you. We had a meeting earlier today, and first off, we had a presentation on the Cedar Hemlock partition. As you know, there's been an issue around the stumpage rate. Stuart and Brad both spoke to that, Stuart Carr. And right now, their technical working group is doing some work on collecting data from UCTS. They're having another meeting on the 29th, and they hope to provide some more detailed data for the mayor prior to the time he may have discussions at a provincial level about the Cedar Hemlock partition. They're looking at two different options inside the stumpage rate system. We then had a caribou recovery update from Darcy Peel, and it was a really good update, actually. Been a bit of a slowdown because of the elections and staffing turnovers in government. As well, the predator management program has had some challenges to it through the legislation. So there's a bit of concern that that's a bit on hold for a while, but the hearing now has been moved to February, and it was supposed to be in November. So there'll be an update on that when it goes ahead. Right now, they're looking at doing some herd options and some planning engagement on the herd options, which is what they're focusing on. And they are going to have practitioner involvement in that. So that'll be starting soon, and that'll be an opportunity to look at specific area in Clearwater are looking at those herd options and being developed. We then had a conversation about the timber supply apportionment and a response to government. And Heather and Leslie are going to look at the opportunities to form a small subcommittee out of this group to look at what the government response we might want to have to government with regards to finding additional volumes if it's available, looking at the salvage program again, making sure volumes available for some of those things, especially for some of those small volumes that are needed for niche markets and that type of thing. We then talked about the community economic development strategy, specifically the forestry sector. Quite a bit of discussion on that. It was new to some people, but one of the people have volunteered to go back to some people and talk to them about a wood guild and come back to see, so that there's an organized mechanism where people can go to say, here's the wood that I need, here's what I could do with it, so that there's an opportunity for people to blend together and form partnerships to find those little niche markets for the wood supply. The biggest thing was wood supply. Some people I think are stepping up to that really quite good. I know our CEO had a phone call right after the meeting to specifically talk about that and trying to set up some meetings with some of the major licensees. One of them phoned in. But it was a really good meeting this morning, and it was really productive, I think, and moved along in a lot of ways with regards to issues that we want to deal with. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Banford. Moving on to the Community Economic Development Task Force. The Community Economic Task Strategy report has been distributed to the task force members, and there will be a meeting early in February to discuss the report and next steps. Moving on to community representation reports, tourism or trade.
So I attended a Tourism Wealth Grey meeting on January the 13th, which was my first meeting with this board. Certainly very keen. They sure like working together, which is really nice. Some of the issues that was raised was trying to get, sooner than later response on the River Road, noting that there's a number of marketing campaigns that are about hidden waters, and it's so hidden that you can't get to it right now, so that's not great. There's lots of discussion about the MRDT, and it is this year that that's being brought forward. They have sent out a schedule of some of their engagement that they want to be doing. At that meeting, I had suggested that maybe the executive director speak with the CAO as well as Area A, and to get those thoughts on it. It is always so interesting to look at organizations that take tax dollars and how that's used to promote, and just looking at it from different angles. Is there room to work together differently or to do some different things? And I did sometimes feel that some of the projects haven't always been formed, so I'm hoping that there's some more partnership opportunities there. And I think that working with our CAO and also Area A, that's really going to close things off. But they are very keen, that group, so keen. But we do have some decisions to make with the MRDT. So we'll have the draft minutes that'll come forward. In the meantime, there is a recommendation that the minutes of the Tourism Wealth Grey Board meeting held on November 4th be received.
Second for that? Any questions? All those in favor?
I will also say that they struggled with Zoom, and it was really kind of cute. Okay, so how do we all put our hands up? And so everybody, even though we're 10 months in, there's still room for handbooks and manuals and all sorts of things. So, and a lot of them were just getting used to the idea of meeting by Zoom, and that's one of the reasons that there was some gaps for not always having a quorum, and I found that really interesting.
Okay, moving on to Wealth Grey Community Forest Commission, Councillor Banford.
And the next meeting will be announced when it's scheduled.
Thank you. Moving on to staff report, the CA report for December 2020. Is there any questions on that? CA report? As usual, very full.
A long list. It's like longer than usual.
Yeah. Okay, no questions? Okay, moving on to grant and aid for the Wealth Grey Search and Rescue. There's a recommendation that council approves the grant and aid request to a maximum of $1,000 for Wealth Grey Search and Rescue for 2021 property taxes, with funds to be expended from the 2021 grant and aid budget. Do you want to talk to that, one of you?
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Acting Mayor Frizzle. This is just to cover the 2021 property taxes for the freshwater fisheries piece of property. The trailer that they put on that piece of property is a Class 6 now, so it's been assessed some higher taxes. Last year it was about $860, I believe, for their portion of the taxes. So they are expecting that the district would offset that for this year, and then the permissive tax exemption bylaw comes up for renewal this year in the fall, and they'll apply for an exemption for their 2022 and on. So that will be up to council when that bylaw comes up. But this will be in the meantime for 2021.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to move that recommendation?
No, second.
Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to the Canfor Legacy funding for $2,000. Should I ask you to talk to it first? Sure.
The reason why it's on the agenda to be dealt with is because if it sits and gets rolled over at year end, because it's not a conditional revenue that we've received, it goes as part of the surplus. And I don't think council wants that. I think we would like to make sure we direct it to a reserve of some sort for the a general operating reserve is an easier one to pull money out when you do decide to do the budget process what you want to spend it on. Whereas the 894, people are thinking the COVID money, that's actually conditional. Same with the road money, we will be bringing you a report on February 2nd for the Trans Mountain money we got specific to roads.
budget, surplus, it's harder for us to pull it back out again. Just wanted to, make sure.
Okay, so the recommendation is that council directs account for legacy funds in the amount of $200,000 to the district's general operating reserve. These funds were received in 2020 as a condition of the ministerial Order 9 agreement for the sale, transfer of forest tenure from Canfor to Interforest. Do I have a seconder? Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. All right, moving on to the Thompson-Cariboo Regional District Invasive Plant Service.
In November, there was a presentation by James Vera and his, coworkers, requesting or providing information to council on a municipality, program that we can get involved in for, invasive weeds. There was a notice of motion later on, but that's a little bit different for this. So what they're looking at is we will need to provide them a recommendation that we want to participate in the program, and then it's a tax requisition from the regional district. It's not us putting the $10,000 in and then taxing. It is a tax, yes, of course, but it's from a different, perspective. So the recommendation, of course, I believe the community at large would benefit from this significantly. And so the recommendation is that the council authorize district clerk to participate in the Thompson-Cariboo Regional District Invasive Weed Control Service starting in 2022. So it actually doesn't hit your budget until 2022.
Oh, come on. I have a question. I can't remember if we covered this when they came, but if we later wanted to remove ourselves from the program, what's the process on timeline for that? Say if we don't find that the community is getting the value that we expect.
So the part that I don't remember, I don't know if, Ms. Shepherd does, but generally they actually do a bylaw that says this is the service chief. So it would be a matter of, following the bylaw. I'm assuming that that's the way this process is gonna be, that's usually how services are handled, but.
I believe the local government act, deals with specifics of it, the municipality would ask for a service review of that service, and then they would have the option after the service review of run.
Okay, so it's not like it's a 5-year commitment, or it's like, we could review it on an annual basis if we.
It's like a mosquito control thing, like, so we pay them, so if we get tax notification for it, and once in a while, people start to, they wanna check into it and not, participate anymore.
Okay, moving on to mutual aid agreement extension. Are you speaking to that, Ms. Crew, or is it 58?
So yes, so we have a mutual aid agreement that we've been basically involved in for the regional district and, our neighboring fire departments, essentially since 2009. And, it's come up for renewal for another 5 years. So this time we asked that they add, $5 million under section 7.1 to insure. And then, we'll do the 5-year term, but, Mr. Smith, the fire chief, and other fire chiefs have come up with an accountability code, color code. That's been added to the, agreement as well, and it, shows what it looks like on page 71 of your agenda. So of course, we only provide mutual aid if, we have the ability to. We're not forced to be there if we can't be there with our team. It's a renewal essentially. Okay. So the recommendation is that the council renew the mutual aid firefighting assistance agreement between the District of Clearwater and the Thompson-Cariboo Regional District, which operates Blackpool and Baby Volunteer Fire Departments for a term of 5 years, commencing December 1st and expiring November 30th, 2025. And we didn't get it from them until December, so that's why we're off on the.
I'll make recommendation.
I'll second it.
Any further questions?
Wait,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Councillor Banford.
Your curiosity, does Birch Island not have a small fire department, or are they considered part of Avonby?
They're in between. They're right in between. They're not part of Bandy and they're not part of Clearwater, but of course, either fire department does help out, correct? If we have an issue. And Birch Island. So the ministry report, no, we don't, the ministry report does that.
Okay. Thank you.
They tried about 6 years ago to, get a fire service there, but it was voted down by the residents. Maybe they wonder if they take that one. Okay, any further questions? Okay, if not, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to council strategic plan quarterly report. Just provide you the fourth quarter update, on the accomplishments of things that are still in process. Any questions on it? You're lost, page 72. Oh, on there?
We're going to bylaws.
Yeah, we got that, that's nice.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yes.
I think if I could just make a comment, is that it just really goes to show that having all of these plans, even if they seem lofty, they come to fruition. And so, you know, all of the planning that is done, the reports that are done, it comes out, and I really appreciate the clarity and, you know, being able to follow this roadmap and having it tie back into the strategic priorities. I find it gives really good parameters. So I want to thank the whole staff for their work on it and keeping it is, yes, and just having that team approach, that it's not off all in directions, like it's following the plan. So thank you very much.
And unfortunately, they're not sitting on a shelf, they're actually doing.
Well, but even if they did, because some of them, they do sit there for a while, but they're there for when the right opportunity comes about. So there's something to be said for it.
Okay, moving on to bylaw. Moving on to bylaw number 23, 2021, this is the Clearwater Volunteer Fire Department. You go on, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Frizzle and Council. So this bylaw is being introduced as a bylaw to repeal previous bylaw that can go under corporation. There's been quite a few legislative and changes. The fire service review in 2017 recommended we redo some sections of our bylaw, but we just decided to rewrite a whole new one. We worked with legal counsel, we worked for the past few months, taking what the recommendations that came from our legal counsel, used our old bylaw, recommended one from the council, and just make sure that it all ties into what we need legally, it works for our town. So there's quite a few significant changes from the old one. We pulled out the remuneration part of the old one, we would like to put it into a policy rather than a bylaw. That's why we're looking at this one. We've realigned our burning regulations to tie in with BC welfare service in principle and in relation to size, so that it's more uniform. So we're not talking about one thing and they're having another thing stated. We're recommending first review.
Any questions? Okay, so the recommendation is that bylaw 233, 2021, a bylaw for the continuation and regulation of the volunteer fire department of the District of Clearwater be introduced in the rest of the time. Is there a motion for that? Alright. Okay, so if District of Clearwater bylaw number 233/2021, a bylaw for the continuation and regulation of the volunteer fire department of the District of Clearwater. Whereas the community charter provides that a municipality may establish and regulate services for the community, including the fire department. And whereas Council for the District of Clearwater wishes to define the powers, authorities, and responsibilities of the fire department, therefore the Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembled enacts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater Volunteer Fire Department Regulations Bylaw number 233/2021, the BC Fire Code, the Fire Services Act, and the Opening, Burning, Smoke Control Regulation 152-2019, Environmental Management Act, all as amended or replaced as deemed to be enforced and effective within the district. All those in favor? Okay. So,
I'd like to make a motion that second and third reading be combined.
is there a second to that?
I will second that motion.
All right, so District Clearwater bylaw number 233/2021, a bylaw for the continuation and regulation of the volunteer fire department of the District of Clearwater. Whereas the community charter provides that a municipality may establish and regulate services to the community, including the fire department. And whereas Council for the District of Clearwater wishes to define the powers, authorities, and responsibilities of the fire department, therefore the Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembled enacts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater Volunteer Fire Department Regulations Bylaw number 233/2021. The BC Fire Code, the Fire Services Act, and the Open Burning Smoke Control Regulations 152-2019, Environmental Management Act, all as amended or replaced are deemed to be enforced and effective within the district. All those in favor? Carried. So moving on to bylaw number 246/2020, zoning amendment.
So this, is the zoning amendment for, Haring Road. That's just first, second reading, public hearing. Then it has to go to, then the third reading, then it has to go to the Ministry of Transportation. And so now it's ready for adoption.
So the recommendation is that District of Clearwater zoning bylaw number 133 amendment bylaw number 246/2020 be adopted. Seconder? Mackenzie? Okay, so District of Clearwater bylaw number 246/2020, a bylaw to amend District of Clearwater zoning bylaw number 133. Whereas an application under RZ-20-01 for amendment to zoning bylaw number 133 has been made, and whereas the desirable changes in uses of land have been considered, and whereas the zoning amendment conforms the District of Clearwater official community plan, now therefore Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembled enacts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as District of Clearwater zoning bylaw number 133, amendment bylaw number 246/2020. All those in favor? Carried. Okay. So the next bylaw is bylaw number 247/2021, water rate bylaw. Mr.
So we needed to do an update of the bylaw to add, the charges that we've been charging for the water hauling, particularly for the weekend rate for our staff, and then for the, units for the count, so I'm gonna turn it over to the secretary.
Thanks. So we, this is just for the rest of 2021, because we'll be bringing the water rate bylaw again to council in fall for 2022 and onward. So this is just a $10 per cubic meter water hauling rate and, $10 per unit, camp rate. So, there's about 540. At the time of reading the report, we thought there was 550 for the financial, but 540 for the work camp that's currently in town for the next probably year to 2 years. And so that helps to go into reserves or to help towards capital or to offset user fees or such capital in budget.
And we don't differentiate, between whether there's 200 people in the camp or 40. It's like a motel unit. A motel gets charged for 67 units, they'll get charged for the 540. And of course, on the crime zone and ASCO, so we know all the things.
So have we been invoicing them up until now?
No.
And, but they were expecting an invoice?
No. They knew that they would be coming on to pay.
Okay.
But we gave them until 2021 because they paid for the infrastructure.
That, I was just looking for that.
Yeah, and they went in and they actually weren't in there physically until October 1st, which is meeting 15.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a really good, very fair.
Yeah.
Very fair, so thank you.
So the recommendation is that bylaw 247/2021, a bylaw to amend District of Clearwater user fees for 2020 to 2021, bylaw number 219/2019 be introduced and read for its time. This is that, Taylor, Mackenzie. So the District of Clearwater bylaw number 247/2021, a bylaw to amend District of Clearwater water and user fees for 2020 to 2021, bylaw number 219. Whereas section 194, 1 of the community charter allows council by bylaw to impose fees payable in respect of funding the water services. Now therefore, the municipal council of the District of Clearwater, province of British Columbia, and open meeting assembled enacts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as District of Clearwater water user fees for 2020-2021. Bylaw number 219/2019, amendment bylaw number 247/2021. All those in favor? Carried. Moving on to the next recommendation.
I will recommend, make a motion that we read both recommendations.
District of Clearwater bylaw number 247/2021, a bylaw to amend District of Clearwater user fees for 2020-2021, bylaw number 290. Whereas section 194, 1 of the community charter allows council by bylaw to impose fees payable in respect of funding the water services. Now therefore, the municipal council of the District of Clearwater, province of British Columbia, and open meeting assembled enacts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as District of Clearwater water user fees for 2020 to 2021, bylaw number 219/2019, amendment bylaw number 247/2021. All those in favor? Carried. Moving on to correspondence from Lyle. Request for support from the City of Nelson for vaccination priority for essential infrastructure employees. Any comments from council?
I will just comment that, last March or April, the district, of Clearwater, was a member municipality of the city of Kamloops. So we're not a member municipality then, but we actually did a, mutual aid agreement, if you will, with the city of Kamloops and other member municipalities within the TNRD to, help us out if we did have our older staff go down, because we get the certain tickets and stuff like that to run our system, so we do have a mutual aid agreement in place. I'm not so to say that we are kind of covered, but I think it's nice, you know, that idea for the coverage.
Really like, I find it very hard for me to be able to make any determination as to priority. Like, with no disrespect to the staff, like, in public works or anywhere else in district staff, but, you know, there's a bigger picture, and like, I just don't feel that I'm, knowledgeable enough, and even understanding, where that would even fall against other groups in my old district for priority.
So in my own experience,
about the vaccine shortages rolling out, like trying to push municipalities up the list when I'm guaranteeing we've been considered because we are a basic component of the plan, right? So I just feel like maybe now is not the right time to start poking public health.
And like I said,
That's what I poke up.
we have put a plan B in place in case we do have our utility people go down anyway. So I think it's a discussion that we'll do.
Moving on, motion to receive.
Oh, motion, that's what we have to do? Motion to receive?
No, you can.
Okay, so the next, letter is a request for support from the Ashcroft Community Center Hub. Councillor Sim?
When I read this, my inclination was just to step out. It's not our neighborhood, it's just not our, thank you for sharing.
Any further discussion on that? No? Okay, moving on to, correspondence with information items, the guiding lights across BC for February 22nd, 2021.
I don't even think we have to, so.
No, but, I was just talking about this with Ms. Grew, we could put it up on our website, and people, if they do want to put out blue lights in their homes or businesses or whatever, and they know, they know that that's an option for them. I don't know if that's even something we wanna do. I'm not getting anything, so I was gonna go just moving on. BC Hydro 2020 annual report. And, Thompson-Nickel Regional District Building Inspection Services, December 2020.
I want to go back to the BC Hydro. I don't understand the grants. Like, if they, I mean, they're not really in my good books right now, and,
Okay.
I just have to. 126. So we pay net property tax and grant payments to local governments. The grant program is a provincial government initiative, and the amount paid are determined under the current legislation. Listed below are the grants paid to each community in the Thompson-Okanagan Regional District. And we got a grant from BC Hydro for $56,000. And is that, yeah, no, we talked about that at our last budget meeting. Do we get this every year from them? In exchange for paying 90,000, or what did you say it was up to now? 118,000, or
Our lights, you mean?
yeah,
This is a 1% in the utility companies, under the community charter, paying a 1% of their annual revenue in lieu of property taxes for their wires, et cetera. Like infrastructure is not considered improvement, so we were getting it from Mass on the meeting.
Yeah. This is actually dropped over $10,000 to a 10 for leaving. So it's based on the revenue that they get from their line closure.
I think it ranks up there with the carbon tax. Bugs me. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on that? So, we're moving on to notice of motion, the Silga call for resolution for 2021 convention. Councillor Sim?
So in light of the email that Ms. Bruce sent out today, I wondered if maybe council wanted to entertain a bit of a different approach. So one, to endorse the TNRD letter that they had sent, which I think is good. The second thing is to maybe write, or bring it to Silga, and even doing, the woman who spoke to us, to do a presentation to all Silga community members, because like the, invasive species with the mussels, that took a big group effort, and I don't know if you know that story, right? So, you know, it was just creating that awareness, and I think that that's what we have to do. I know that the woman that you spoke with, her recommendation was that, you know, we lobby as a government for it. But I think that some information has to be done on all the single memberships. I wouldn't have understood the Flyware muscles if I hadn't listened to my counterparts down in the it's the same for the invasive species. So I just don't know if this is the right route or if we just follow on the heels of the TNRD, and I just wondered if you have some thoughts on it.
So are you wanting to change the?
I'm looking to rescind it and to say maybe a different path. I think it's still worthwhile, but this is new information that Ms. Bruce shared. The TNRD letter is new, so it seems to me this is a better effort done collectively than it is just individually, so.
Yeah, I think, powering your engine through the regional district and other municipalities within the Silga region, which is quite a few, will have stronger message to the government.
And I think that lobbying, as opposed to just the motion, would be good, and that's why I think the information and sharing it as to why. So I guess I would remove the motion. Can I do that? It was good. Thank you very much for reaching out to that woman today. I think that by having that information, it was great.
So just let that go. Do you want to make a resolution that you want to support the regional district?
I would do that, but maybe somebody else would like to do that from the table. I've been on the board.
I'll make that motion. How to word it? No idea.
We can word similar to what, if you're okay with that, we can word similar to what they have in the paragraph. You know, this is just what we're looking for. Enhanced protection, increased base funds, and so on.
Okay.
Is there a second for that?
And then just discussion on it would be maybe that we CC it to Silga.
Yeah.
And so we just, you know, make them aware, and I'll bring it up at the next meeting, but at least they've got some correspondence that directs it. So thank you very much, Councillor Haring and Councillor Mackenzie.
All those in favor? Carried. There's no other business, so then we come up to comments from the public. We have one public here.
Better comment on something that. The only comment that came up during the whole meeting, I was just thinking about our whole challenge with homelessness, which leads, of course, to all the sad things that happen in the world. And then the trail task force and the people that will be working on the trail. And I don't know about words like insurance and mom says she can't do it. But I think that if young people have hope that they're doing something to build the community, for example, build a trail from the high school to the class, that you might find that you have more help than you can even handle. So that was my comment, is why not include those shy youth? I mean, if they could go home and brag, or tell their friends and relatives that they built that trail, or at least help, wouldn't that be a lovely, hopeful way to go into the summer with, you know, and I did it, or I contributed sort of attitude.
Well, I'll comment about those cases of care. Having fun, they've reached out to Suzanne Butcher, kind of along the line, the trail, we had talked about that. So we do have that for the Royal Lake.
Oh, okay, because
I think it's also.
That's quite the ESO, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than, I was thinking of a high school student.
I think.
Look at those good, strong young fellows, those girls in there that are just wanting to do something.
I think the good news is that you've got the chair that's on that committee, and also the principal of the school, so likely there will be that engagement, because I know the principal, he's pretty dynamic when it comes to that youth engagement piece, so.
Yeah, I think it goes at one point about competency.
Oh, yeah. I think you're on to something. That's definitely it.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Because you're right, hopelessness is a topic.
Yeah, well, that's my big word for the whole community. You know, we need hope, correct? We need economic development hope, we need youth hope, we need, you know, we just need hope. It's been a kind of a hopeless kind of year. And
for coming.